Fake dinosaur discoveries that fooled the world. When modern scientific imaging techniques are deployed, successfully forging a dinosaur fossil becomes harder than faking a banknote. But to some, it can be just as lucrative. The allure of internet clout is an intoxicating driver that has driven people to some very strange, often embarrassing things. But fake fossils have existed longer than obnoxious YouTube personalities. So, what has traditionally motivated fossil hoaxers, and what lasting harm can these forgeries have on the scientific and layman communities? Let's talk about it. Fake dinosaur fossils may date back to the dawn of humanity, and there are even a few deeply affected people who think they're all fake. But ignoring the willfully ignorant, what exactly determines a fake fossil? If you're standing in a museum, staring down at the skeletal gape of a reptilian predator from millions of years ago, chances are you're not looking at an original. For example, of the known Tyrannosaur fossils, only 3 are more than 80% complete, and only 6 more of these have even more than half their bones. Generally, the rarer and better preserved the fossil is, the less chance it'll be on display. But there are other reasons that museum pieces may have to be fake too. Fossils are mineralized bones that are now essentially made of solid rock. Rock is heavier than bone, so there are inherent logistical challenges when suspending them precariously above innocent bystanders. So, even if the original bones, the majority of the skeleton has to be filled with replicas. This means, while fake skeletons are up in the halls being slobbered over by overly enthusiastic visitors, the original fossils can be in the research basements going through testing. But do these count as fake fossils? Between ancient civilizations discovering giant, toothy skulls to scammers making deliberately misleading contributions to the world of paleontology, where do we draw the line? What are the motivations behind fossil hoaxes, and how do scientists know the difference between what's real and what's not? Let's start with the ancients, like the dragons. It seems that for as long as there has been civilization, there have been dragon legends. Dragons arise independently in cultures all over the world, and some believe there's a link between dragon mythology and dinosaur fossils. In Zoroastrian literature, dragons were a symbol of greed and sin, and later, the lust that monotheists run their whole platform against. In ancient Greece, dragons that could spit poison led to the classic image of fire breathing, both of which show up in multiple myths. The ancient Roman cavalry carried a dragon's head mounted on a post, though, like almost all of their legends, they stole this from the Greeks. India, too, has legends involving dragons that could eat an elephant, as do the indigenous Americans. The Maya worshipped a serpent deity that was distinctly dragon-like. In the north, the Illini people depict a bird-like dragon called the Piasa bird, and horned serpents show up in multiple Native American oral histories. Far east, dragons were associated with good fortune and imperial strength that are depicted in zoomorphic characters as far back as 6000 BC. In China, a book called Huayan describes the discovery of the dragon bones among Jurassic sedimentary deposits. But where did all these legends come from? It's a romantic idea that ancient civilizations were busy building their early houses, quarrying rocks and mining for minerals when they stumbled upon the enormous teeth or horn frills of dinosaurs. And it's easily believable that these discoveries led to the myths and legends of the before time. But there isn't all that much to back this up with, yet. So it has to remain an intuition for now. Still, there are some fossils from Sicily that are perhaps even more convincing of this concept. Next up, we're talking Cyclops. In Greek mythology, Odysseus was the hero who fought the giant one-eyed monster known as Polyphemus, the Cyclops. This particular monster was the son of Poseidon, and he would be eventually blinded by our hero for being everything the Greeks were trying not to be: uncivilized, primitive, and openly contemptuous of the gods. This might seem like an imaginative way of declaring your position to the world, but it perhaps wasn't based entirely on imagination. Until around 200,000 years ago, and long before human settlers arrived there, Paleoloxodon falconeri, pygmy elephants, a species of dwarf elephant, lived on Sicily and Malta. This was a member of the genus of elephants that produced colossal 4.6-meter behemoths like the straight-tusked mammoth. Yet this particular species was one of the smallest elephants ever, at only around a meter tall. But how does a pygmy elephant lead to a giant grumpy shepherd with one eye? Well, elephants are herbivorous prey animals, and so benefit from having eyes well around the sides of their face to keep an eye on everything that's going on around them. Humans, on the other hand, evolved from arboreal primates, and so evolved to have eyes on the front of their faces so they wouldn't miss branches and fall to their deaths while jumping through the canopy. Elephants also have enormous nasal cavities. right where their eye would be if they were humans, and this gives their skull the appearance of having a single, large eye hole right in the middle. The result? A huge, dense, and heavy skull with bulky jawbones and a big ol' eye hole right in the middle. This is a compelling argument, but there are some decent counters to it as well. Likewise, there's an enduring piece of pub trivia that suggests that gold-hoarding griffins were inspired by the skeletons of protoceratops found buried in the rock while ancient peoples mined for gold. Unfortunately, there's even less evidence for this one. And besides, even if they are true, these are hardly fakes. They're just cases of mistaken identity. But mistaken identity can certainly lead to enduring falsehoods too. Okay, I know we promised dinosaurs, so let's talk about the dinosaur species that, well, weren't. Much in the way that modern-day naturalists often clamber over one another to identify a new species, the history of paleontology is rife with unhealthy competition. The so-called Bone Wars was just such a competition between two paleontologists, whose rivalry was far more personal than it was professional. Witnesses say that both scientists would go as far as to destroy skeletons while they were still in the ground, to prevent the other from getting their hands on them. Fame-hungry maniacs like this are so eager to name a new animal that they'll relax significantly in their scientific rigor, and this is how we end up with species that never existed. And ironically, the very man who uncovered another famous archaeological hoax, Othniel Charles Marsh, was a creator of some of his own. In the 1860s, Marsh exposed a hoax involving a prehistoric man known as the Cardiff Giant. But in 1883, he presented a reconstruction of Brontosaurus that was erroneously given the head of Camarasaurus, something that wasn't even spotted until 1970. Marsh's counterpart in the Bone Wars, E.D. Cope, locked in a battle of ego to describe more species than Marsh, also discovered his own fake dinosaur called Agathopus. The name Brontosaurus was first entirely discredited and then eventually reinstated, after much debate, to a new group of sauropods, but Agathopus was reassessed in the 1900s to be entirely not real. The public animosity between the pair caused lasting damage to the image of American paleontology in Europe for decades to come. While these fake fossils can be chalked up to overly enthusiastic lunatics, and a lot of Marsh and Cope's groundbreaking work does make up for the hubris, some fakes are far more deliberate in their design. Next up, Sussocaris. Sounds a bit sus? Sussocaris seems to have begun life as a simple joke by the Twitter artist known as Hop. Hop began with an obscure group of animals known as thylacocephalans, pre-dinosaur arthropods from marine environments that survived well into the Cretaceous. Not much is known about these animals, other than that they were weird-looking things, with robotic carapaces and large, compound eyes looking down on elongated, spindly hands. And the relatively unknown artist designed a new one with a striking similarity to a character from the game Among Us. It was dubbed as Sussocaris, and its lore was retrofitted with a story of how it was found in Sussex, England. The joke was opened up to the online paleontology communities and quickly adopted as a meme. The joke accelerated in the hands of the chronically online, becoming a story that was presented as fact, sometimes by people in on the joke, often by those who weren't. Photoshopped scientific papers emerged, as did doctored photos claiming to show original fossils of Sussocaris. Quite quickly, the ratio of those in on the joke to those outside of it flipped. But while this whole saga was popular among the online community, and fooled many commenters, very little, if any, damage was done to the scientific community, who generally checked their sources. And to the contrary of harm, Sussocaris may have inspired more people to take note of what is essentially a poorly known and very obscure group of crustaceans, and this could lead to a better understanding of their role in prehistory. There have certainly been more consequential forgeries in recent decades, like Archaeoraptor and Tridentinosaurus antiquus. In 1931, the fossil of a small, lizard-like reptile with a slender body and long neck was found in the Tyrol region of Italy. In 1959, it was named Tridentinosaurus antiquus, and was thought to show the extraordinarily well-preserved dark-colored body outline of a previously unknown reptile, the oldest known vertebrate found in Italy, at around 280 million years old. Generations of paleontologists believe this to be the oldest animal mummy ever discovered. It appeared to be preserved with traces of skin, and would have been one of the most exciting fossils from the early Permian ever discovered. Debates raged between scientists about what kind of animal this was, and where it should be taxonomically ranked, and it was this question that inspired researchers to take a closer look. And in 2024, a combination of modern imaging techniques revealed that it was, in fact, a fake. The dark pigment turned out to be just black paint, and while there were some hints of fossilized limbs, this was by no means a complete animal at all, let alone a mummified one. Likewise, in 1999, another groundbreaking discovery was made, this time of an animal dubbed Archaeoraptor lionengenesis, thought to be an example of a missing link between dinosaurs and modern birds. This was essentially conclusive proof of the theory that birds are a surviving group of theropod dinosaurs that evolved into many of the new niches exposed after the Cretaceous extinction event that killed almost everything else. National Geographic proudly published the news of this new fossil, despite a rising murmur of doubts from the greater scientific community, and despite it being rejected by both Nature and Science journals. This murmur would ultimately grow teeth and destroy any notion of the animal altogether, as it was found to be a mashup of various other parts of dinosaurs. Another deliberate fake. But this was 14 years later, and by then the damage was done. The revelations bring them with far more than just disappointment. Books were published, museums curated, and exhibitions brought all over the world, spreading false information that would set paleontology back in immeasurable ways. Luckily, we now know that birds are surviving dinosaurs, and this has been since backed up with multiple fossil finds that have passed scientific scrutiny. But the discrediting of evidence long thought to be real sets the truth back decades, and this is of increasing concern to paleontologists. The growing market for fossils is incentivizing more and more hoaxes, and many of these fossils are getting in the way of real science. According to Scientific American, thousands of farmers in fossil hotspots in China have given up their traditional means of income to glue together anything that vaguely resembles a fossil and sell it. Science magazine estimates that up to 80% of fossils in Chinese museums are in some way manipulated, be it combinations of other animals or entirely fake. And in Germany, Professor Rainer Pusch was selling chimpanzee skulls as Neanderthals for over 30 years. But perhaps most worryingly, juggling errors like this paves the way for popular distrust in science in general, and this is leaving more people dangerously exploited by marketing. Back in the day, scientists were revered as arbiters of progress, but it wasn't long before their ideas went against corporate interests. Soon, the media began to discredit scientists who brought inconvenient truths like the benefits of seatbelts in our cars, or the dangers of lead in petrol. Then it was the tobacco industry who wanted us to ignore them, telling us that smoking was perhaps not so great for our health. Scientists went from intelligent and meditative to out of control and wacky. Today, the media attacks scientists because they've discovered that a relentless burning of fossil fuel is making everything go extinct, and that homeopathy is just water that can't cure your cancer, and warning against a number of other brands of lucrative quackery that are currently taking advantage of people in need. And they don't want people to know these things, because there's lots of money invested in us still paying for them. Again, these corporate discoveries go against corporate interests, and yet, it's science that puts up the only fight we have against greed of the ultra-wealthy. Fake dinosaur fossils that slip through the cracks are exactly the opportunities predatory companies are looking for to decry science as unreliable, and, in turn, imply that their harmful products are not that bad. So, whose responsibility is it to make sure these things don't happen? There have been rapid advancements in imaging technologies over recent decades. It is now near impossible to get a fake fossil into the reputable journals like Nature and Science, especially in the wake of recent hoaxes. But the threat remains on two other fronts. One, the rise of social media that has allowed false information to reach unprecedented millions with unprecedented speed. And two, underfunded scientists that are liable to cut corners and bring their biases with them, increasing the risk of bad data getting through. Notice how neither of those threats come from hoaxers themselves? That's because hoaxers, like ego-driven scientists, are a highly predictable element of human nature, and human nature should always be accounted for when science does its thing. We'll never get rid of the toxic influence of meme culture, personal biases, or financial incentives. Instead, it is the job of the scientific method to factor them out of the research. And for the fake fossils, at least this is far easier than you might think. Simply focusing on forensic approach to fossil finds will undercut almost all the corner cutting, all the fraudsters, and save a lot of work down the line. Just as in any crime scene, every dinosaur fossil can be documented in situ with a handful of critical data such as its date, its location, and when it was found. As for the lay people, there will always be myths, and we will forever create imaginary scenarios for our own entertainment. To find the truth, though, it's a matter of doing our own due diligence, citing sources, following references, and, where we have to trust, do so in reputable publications. Not Twitter artists, WhatsApp screenshots, or Murdoch rags. But whether you're a casual fan or a committed researcher, knowing what's real always begins with the old adage, known as the Sagan Standard. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And, in reality, that's all that's needed 90% of the time. It's not just that we only hear about the lucky few fakes that slip through. That's all for today, folks. Check out our other videos for more chit-chat about dinosaurs, fossils, and prehistory. And as always, stay curious, fossil files.